As it was considered inappropriate for anyone outside the membership committee to attend this meeting, the information on the subject application is being presented through this video format. John and I closed on our home in Bel Air on January 13, 2020. We were invited by Carol and David Frecker to attend a soup and stew party on February 29th at their home 2 doors down from us. It was at this get-together with our new neighbors here in Bel Air that we first met Estelle and Scott DeMusy. I didn't remember most people's names as we met so many that night, but I distinctly remember John and I standing on the Freckers' pool deck conversing with David, the three of us sharing stories of our respective lives in the Washington, D.C. area. David had been a JAG officer assigned to the Pentagon, and John was with the U.S. Secret Service in the Washington field office. Throughout our conversation, another individual was standing there, listening in but offering little, until he decided to try to involve us in his campaign against Bel Air Commissioner Tom Curry and the Doyle family. He insisted that we would be reading about it in the papers very soon. We knew of Tom Curry through Bel Air Country Club, but being brand new residents of Bel Air, we were not privy to the politics of the town. We were, however, taken aback by this new acquaintance's expressions of open hostility to others, and that he thought it acceptable to involve us, total strangers. He went on and on about Curry, the commission, Doyle, the new golf course, and the recent home sale in Bel Air, insisting that, as realtors, John and I should certainly know the real value of the property that formed the basis of his complaints. It's important to note that even before we arrived at that party, this neighbor knew who we were, and he knew exactly where we lived. Please keep that in mind. I believe it was Carol Frecker who first invited me to join the community app Nextdoor. It was through that platform that I was reminded of our interaction with the man from her party. Scott DeMusy, who had stood there listening in on our conversation, who was on a vendetta against Curry et al., would soon make sure I knew exactly who he was. I soon found myself the latest target of Scott DeMusy as he went about stalking, bullying, and doxing me on that same local, very public social media site. But that wasn't enough for Scott. He had a posse of fellow travelers that he was able to enlist in stalking me as well. I also learned that I was just the latest victim of the bully of Bel Air. I also quickly learned that Scott DeMusy and or his wife were able to control the narrative on the Bel Air Nextdoor site. Estelle DeMusy has been a lead on that site since before I joined and is able to directly influence what posts and comments are deleted. She also influences which neighbors are suspended and or permanently thrown off the site. Scott DeMusy found his own niche on the site as a cyberbully, a stalker, and a doxer of his fellow Bel Air residents. At some point, he must have realized that his words would come back to haunt him, so he would eventually remove most of his comments. Leading up to Estelle DeMusy's run for a seat on the Bel Air Town Commission, the election for which was held in March of 2021, Scott began keeping a much lower profile on Nextdoor. Just recently, Scott DeMusy's profile was deactivated on the Nextdoor platform. I wonder why. Unfortunately for Scott and Estelle DeMusy, I realized it was necessary to grab what I could before it was removed. But I still missed a lot. I'll let the DeMusy's words and actions speak for themselves, along with the sentiments of others who often refer to and about them. Scott DeMusy formerly worked at the St. Pete and Tampa Bay Times, and it only stands to reason that he maintains relationships with those within the local newspaper community, as is addressed elsewhere in this presentation. I believe his contacts include staff photographers. The day before President Trump was to arrive for his event at the Pelican Club, I mistakenly described on Nextdoor the t-shirt I would be wearing for his arrival at the airport. As John and I stood on the rope line awaiting POTUS's arrival at a special hangar at Tampa International, I thought it curious that one of the credentialed photographers was more interested in aiming his camera my way than towards the president. The very next day, my picture appeared on Nextdoor within the thread about the president coming to Bel Air, the picture that had been taken from where that photographer had positioned himself. I have only recently discovered that same picture in an article on Bel Air News, appearing twice on the same page. Scott DeMusi not only called me a racist, he accused me of altering this photo. The same weekend of Trump's visit to Bel Air, the president of my company contacted me about an email that had been sent to our broker owner containing screenshots of some of my interaction and comments on Nextdoor about the POTUS visit. I'm always very careful about how I conduct myself on all social media platforms, so there was no there. But this person evidently thought that, considering my profession, expressing my political views would be cause for reprimand or worse. When I researched the person who had sent the email, I found out that he too was connected to the news media business, just like Scott DeMusi, and currently a local radio station DJ. While I cannot prove that this individual was part of DeMusi's posse on a mission to harm me in any way possible, Scott had made a similar comment on Nextdoor early on, acknowledging that I was in the real estate business. He suggested at that time that maybe people would not want to do business with me if they knew I was a conservative. Whitney Wilson is a frequent target of Scott DeMusi. In this exchange, she says, "Why don't you find some other woman to pick on and troll like you did to our neighbor down the street?" She was referring to me. Whitney continues in her reply to Scott DeMusi. "You've got a lot of nerve to accuse me of spreading false info. You're the one on here who has posted provable lies, and those were about me, my family. What's your motivation for all this harassment?" Whitney again, "I could have waited for your comments to be reported, but publicly standing up for Gail, a new neighbor who lives so close to us, in response to your ad hominem attack against her, which I still don't understand, by the way, seemed like the right thing to do at the time, at least on a moral level." In this incredible exchange that says so much, Scott DeMusi says to Jan Owen, "Please don't respond to Whitney. She's just a troll and antagonist on Nextdoor." To which Whitney replies, "You can call me names, but many on here have seen what you do, the name calling, the character attacks, and the aggression you've shown towards women who live in this neighborhood. The only objective reason for your hostility seems to be on account of differing political views or personal choices. Maybe online bullying and harassing your female neighbors makes you feel like a big man. I don't know what your actual deal is, but I know enough about you and Jan to know that something is very much off with you." She closes by saying, "It sure seems like you both have an extreme agenda that doesn't include getting along with any of the people who live in this neighborhood." Here, Scott DeMusi goes after Stephanie Wheeler. "I'm curious, why so much concern for a town you don't even live in? I'm not sure what your agenda is here." Stephanie replies, "I don't have an agenda. I'm a free thinker and say it as I see it. And what I see is a sad individual who, along with a few others, feels the need to use this platform to slander upstanding members in our community. Individuals whose lives must be so empty that they feel the need to create chaos in order to feel relevant. For you, Scott, and your posse, I will pray." To Dan Coletti, "But seriously, can we talk about that house you have for sale on DeSoto? It's been sitting on the market for a while. You may want to talk to Tom Curry. He really knows how to get the most for a home." Here, Scott DeMusi schools John Henry Leeser. "I also get you're not a Bel Air property owner and you don't care." He continues on, "My young friend, you have so much to learn. I suggest you take a remedial lesson in civics and I'm sure you'll understand." Of course, John Leeser picked up on the fact that Scott DeMusi had not even spelled the name of the town correctly. In this exchange with Michael Howland, Scott DeMusi says, "Good one, Michael. I live in Bel Air, and yes, we have whack jobs that truly think our town should be gated off." Whitney weighs in, "Scott, are you saying everyone in the gated RPD is a whack job? That's just a pretty sweeping comment you have up there." On December 4th, 2019, Scott DeMusi, Estelle DeMusi, and Tom Olson filed separate but identical ethics complaints against Carla Redstadt, Bel Air Town Commissioner and Deputy Mayor. Over the course of the next 2 years, Ms. Redstadt was forced to defend herself and her family against claims Town Attorney Jay Daniel described as vicious, reckless, and without regard for the facts or the law. While the COE resolved the matter in her favor, Ms. Redstadt later stated in 2 letters dated February 10 and June 25, 2022, "These past 2 years have brought my family a tremendous amount of stress, time, and energy dealing with a complaint full of discrepancies and lies. This whole experience forever changed my wish to serve the town as a public officer and has unfortunately affected future residents from serving on the town commission." To help cover her out-of-pocket expenses and legal fees to defend this claim, the residents of the town of Bel Air reimbursed Ms. Redstadt almost $37,000. When Estelle DeMusi announced her run for a seat on the Bel Air Town Commission, word quickly spread that one of her goals was to defund the Bel Air Police Department. She had expressed that opinion via an email sent on June 12, 2020 to the commissioners, deputy mayor, mayor, and town manager, where she suggested, quote, "We shift those funds to support social impact services," end quote. She wrote, quote, "Bel Air could lead by reducing the financial resources dedicated to our police force to supporting more children's programs for both residents and non-residents," end quote. Concerned residents who did not want to see the elimination of the Bel Air Police Department took to social media and the U.S. mail to get the word out, and Estelle DeMusi went about trying to put the toothpaste back into the tube. Copies of the email were mailed to Bel Air residents, and soon it appeared on Nextdoor. Due to his wife running for office, Scott DeMusi had been on his very best behavior, but he couldn't help himself and was drawn into doing what he does best. BelAirNews.com is run by James Johnston, and a frequent commenter on his site is Bel Air Bob. Remember that ethics complaint filed against Carla Redstadt back in December 2019 by Scott DeMusi, Estelle DeMusi, and Tom Olson? Well, a very lengthy comment made by Bel Air Bob to an article dated July 18, 2021, titled "Bel Air's Bonafide Private Golf Courses," is an almost exact overlay of the narrative that accompanied that ethics complaint from almost 2 years earlier. So the question is, which one of the 3 poses as Bel Air Bob on BelAirNews.com to hide their true identity? If you had to place a bet, where would you put your money? Just 4 months after his wife lost her bid to sit on the town commission, and after she had adamantly denied what her now infamous email plainly indicated, that she wanted to defund the Bel Air Police Department, here's Bel Air Bob himself exposing the truth. In an article found on BelAirNews.com dated July 22, 2021, and entitled "Bel Air's Former Commissioner," Bel Air Bob wrote this: "Bel Air has no business having its own cop department." Case closed. The DeMusis are well known to the Bel Air PD, not only for their proposition that the department be eliminated, but because they are incapable of complying with the leash laws. Copies of the police reports filed against the DeMusis will be provided each committee member at the conclusion of the presentation. These reports speak of the DeMusis being verbally combative, argumentative, of walking away and ignoring the officer's commands to stop. But the most egregious is contained in the report filed by Officers Allison Daniels and Christopher Mall. In this confrontation, when Scott Demusy was asked to put the leash on his dog, Demusy held up the leash and stated, "Can I just put this around my neck?" "Better yet," he said, looking at Officers Daniels and Mall, "I'll just put it around yours." Estelle Demusy served on the Bel Air Park and Tree Board for 1 year, and as such, elected to have her packet of materials for each upcoming meeting delivered to her house rather than mailed. Such deliveries are always made by one of the police officers. In the following posting, taken from the Facebook page of Scott Demusy, he uses one such delivery of this packet for his wife to besmirch the members of the Bel Air Police Department once again. On his Facebook post, Scott Demusy remarks, "I think they like me so much they paid another visit tonight." When someone responded, "OMG, really? Isn't this considered abusive?" Scott replies, "Nah, we're used to it. We've even had a few spirited conversations with our boys in blue. In all fairness, not all of them are dicks, but there are a few that tend to not use the gray matter between their ears. A good cop always uses discretion." The Demusys are perceived by many in this community as a volatile couple. He has shown himself publicly to be a serial stalker and a bully, and he seems to favor women as his targets. She enables him by cleaning up his messes on the local public forum and by eliminating anyone who would dare to push back. They need a new set of potential victims, and Bel Air Country Club is the perfect venue.